Well, welcome, and thank you for being here and listening to what we're going to share with you here shortly about the Growing Young initiative at LaGrave. My name is Mark Stipe, and I serve on the Growing Young committee along with these guys here, Steve and Matt, and Rachel and Jacqueline are back there, and Vince is right here. And we are a committee that got together. We started our work about a year ago. But we'll get into that. But today, what you can expect to hear from us, after I figure this out, is we're going to give you a little historical context about Growing Young at LaGrave. We're going to talk about the committee, what our work has been over the last year, and where we expect to go over the next couple of months. And then we're going to kind of educate you on these 6 core commitments of what Growing Young means. And then we'll get into implementation of this at LaGrave. So first, show of hands, who is familiar with Growing Young? Kind of.
Okay, all our spouses.
Our spouses and a few others that work here in the youth programming. So back in 2018, Growing Young was passed by council, and this is a relational model of youth. LaGrave worked with the Fuller Youth Ministry Program and passed this model to position and engage teenagers and young adults at LaGrave, right? And how we do that is not just through the teenagers, but it takes all of us. So way back, that was 4 long years ago, and a lot happened over the last 4 years. So a lot got lost in the mix. We had Growing You presentations before. We had surveys that went out, and a lot got forgotten. So our job is to kind of revamp that here. Many of the suggestions that we received when we worked with the Fuller Institute, those were implemented through this book, Growing Young. So we're taking a lot of this information from this book, and Bob has extra copies of these, and I highly recommend that everyone gets familiar with this book. And we will share information on how to get that as well. Statistics from the Fuller Institute show churches' growth in all age groups when a Growing Young model is implemented. So focusing on the youth helps overall church growth. So that is a big reason why we want to move to the model. We'll flip through. Matt, you want to talk about the purpose and charge of this committee?
Sure. So we were charged by council to help design or really implement this program, and it's not that revolutionary. We're not scrapping all the things that we have. We had some initial meetings with a firm called the Ministry Architect, and that was sort of their first stance is, hey, let's go and let's inventory all the things you're doing and all the people and how are they interacting and who's a potential volunteer here. And we were like, well, no, we're not going to redo all that. We've got some really great programs already going. Our job is just really to look at from this perspective, how can we get kids more plugged in? How can we have more participation? How can they be involved in not just, oh, the youth group is that way. This is the big kid church. That's, you guys go over there. And so that's really what we've been trying to do. What have we been up to? We've gone pretty much and met with every committee at church. I've met with like welcoming or fellowship or educate, all these different things. I'm sure I have them all wrong. But even like welcoming, like why are you coming, Growing You, why are you coming to our committee? Hey, how about we have teenagers? How about young people? How about they are the ones that greet people? How about when maybe a group of Calvin kids comes in, you remember one of their names or you ask their names, and when they go ahead and leave, you say, hey, Tony, we're really glad you were here. So it's not a complete upending of all of our systems and processes here, but it's just wiggling in a couple of new changes just to have them feel like they also belong here. I probably skipped over everything on this page. That's fine. So, like I said, we've met with all of the committees, and we've kind of had, hey, we're just here to put in some suggestions. We're not here to mandate you do any of these things. In fact, we're not going to do that. That's not what we're really charged to do. We're just here to be some ideas for you, and then you find better ways to implement into your programs. So we've got 6 core commitments. There they are. I'll read through these, but then we're going to, each of us is going to kind of dive a little bit deeper into that. First is unlocking keychain leadership. Empathize with today's young people. Take Jesus' message seriously. Fuel a warm community. Prioritize young people and families everywhere. It's kind of what we talked about earlier. And then also, be the best neighbor. So Mark's going to talk about keychain leadership.
Yeah, so the first strategy is to unlock keychain leadership. What is keychain leadership? We should probably understand what that is before we can say we need to unlock it. Keychain leaders are pastoral and congregational leaders, are those who have the power to let people in and keep people out. Okay? So think of, obviously, pastoral leaders, right? We've got Peter, Bob. The key is to unlock to unlock the door. All right? Keychain leaders are constantly opening doors and entrusting those who are ready. This is the leader that we want to have. And this is the leader who people often list as the reason they serve in the church today. Keychain leaders must be mature, real, warm, and know what matters to people, and trust and empower others, and take the long view. So what would be an example of how we are unlocking keychain leadership right now at LaGrave? What are some ways that we're allowing kids into traditional roles and being okay with them not being perfect? Right? An example, cross and Bible. Right? Sometimes when our youth go up there and do the cross and Bible, it's not absolutely perfect. But they are up there, they're participating in the service. Youth readers, right? Are there ways that we can have youth readers more than what we're doing? I think we do a pretty good job of it, but could we do that more? Empower them to get up during the Sunday service. And the real key to keychain leadership, if anybody here serves on a committee, is I would challenge you to look at your committee's work and think of, how are we thinking of the youth with the work that we're doing as a committee? Are there ways that we can engage the youth in the work that we're doing? Now, one of the committees I serve on is planned giving. That's a difficult question to ask. How are we engaging youth in planned giving? I don't know what the answer is to that. And I don't know if there is an answer to that. But as Matt said earlier, like the welcoming committee, right? That's an easy one. Why not have youth welcoming people to LaGrave? Why not have a proactive, method of welcoming our youth, right? So that's kind of this unlock keychain leadership.
All right, I'm going to speak about the second item here is empathizing with today's young people. Empathy is feeling what another person feels, putting yourself in their shoes. We as a church, if we hope to grow young, need to do that with the young people that are in our church, that we come in contact with, whether it's through outreach or just children that are already members here. If we hope to grow young, we have to make an effort to understand young people, both internally and externally. There are three main questions that plague every young person, and we all went through this ourselves. They're all asking, who am I? What's my identity? Where do I fit in? Which is a question of belonging. And what difference can I make or do I make in the world around me? We all went through this, and when we interact and we see the young people, we need to remember that they're going through that and make an effort to feel what they're feeling. That it's a very basic thing, but it's worth stating. I think we can forget that as a church, that to put ourselves in the young people's shoes in that way. That's the best example. I think we have other examples here to help find identity for young folks. Job mentorship program, opportunities to serve with social concerns committee, helping young people making those connections through our church, and they will begin to identify with our church and with God in that way.
I think the biggest takeaway, I'm not summarizing yet, but we're not here to just try to get more kids' butts in the seat. We're here to have kids feel like they belong here and that they have a role that they can play out. One of the examples in the book Keychain Leadership was a youth that, he kind of was on the margins, and he kind of got befriended by even the custodian at this church. And after a period of time, the custodian said to him, "Hey, how about you've been here a while, you're a good kid, so here's the key to the church. I want you to lock the church up." And this kid, wasn't the youth group program or the message from the pulpit that drew him into the church. It was the fact that somebody trusted him to have the key to the church to lock up. And that just took off for him. He blossomed as a result of having some responsibility here at church. And so a lot of the things that we talk about are really tied to that. We're not looking for a new flashy youth group program. We're looking at how do we make kids feel recognized is one, right? The simple one, the welcoming committee. We can say, that's their job. How about every one of us, when we come to church, we find a little kid or a teenager, even though they're scary. "Hey, what's your name? How are you today?" That's it. That's like all you have to do. We don't have to read this whole book even. Just try that. Committees. Can we allow kids to be on these committees? As scary as it is about the planned giving, I would love to hear what a teenager would have to say about how that would fit into their world. And so just kind of really looking, other than, "Dad, can I have some money?"
Yeah, exactly.
Right? So that's really a lot of the overview of these things. The next part is take Jesus' message seriously. A little less, the thought here is a little less the golden rule, or church is just about being good. I'm a good person, so I'm going to church. And more of like, let's get to know Jesus personally. Let's get to live out what he was teaching. The message today at church, like, Jesus touching the leper and the symbolic nature of what that was. And so the same thing being with the kids. They want to feel like serving others, living out Jesus' word, not just Bible study, catechism. And I'm sure I was the same way that age, right? I mean, it's very hard to feel like Jesus is in 187 pages here, but if I have some of that knowledge, and now I take that and I go and I do a serve project, or I'm doing something outdoors with the neighborhood, or those kinds of things. And so really looking at how can we foster that conversation with kids, because otherwise we're going to early church, you better be there at 10 for, that's just the reality of sometimes of what kids are like. "Oh, I gotta go because my mom and dad are going." How do we make them be like, "Hey, I want to be there, this is important for me, or I got to be there. I got to do the cross today. I kind of skipped over that. Sorry.
Good. No, great.
What's next?
Fuel the warm.
Yeah.
Fuel the warm.
So I think, Matt, that was a great lead into the fourth core commitment that comes out of the Growing You program, which is fueling a warm community. Young people, whether they're 6, 7, 8, up to early 20s, are looking for genuine, warm relationships, and we can foster those through intergenerational interactions. We had my own family. I've got a 14-year-old, 11-year-old, and a 9-year-old. We had a real blessing to sit by the same elderly couple in church week after week for years. And it started with just little interactions, looking at my kids in their eyes and saying, "Hi, good morning, welcome," to asking, "What are you doing? What sports are you into? How's school? How's your teachers? How are your friends?" To them calling us at home, talking to our kids. And that relationship for my kids created a sense of home here at church. When they come here, they're excited. They get to see their friends who are not their ages, they're 70s, 80s. That's really what our church needs. If you see a young person, look at them in their eyes. How are you doing? And that's really what Fuel and Warm Community is. It's not about, having a jazz band. It's not about, more fun, youth group activities for kids are going to draw them in. Today's young people want those real, genuine interactions. And I've seen it with my own children. It fosters a sense of belonging in the community, in the church community. So.
And I would say not just for your kids, but for you.
For us,
them.
And that goes back to the initial note in the book. The whole entire church grows, not just young people getting into the pews, but the whole church grows. It creates a sense of community for my wife and I, for our whole family here. So, and that's the main point of the Growing Young book. So,
it's entitled Growing Young, but it's really for everybody.
Yeah. All right, Mark.
All right, the fifth one is prioritize young people and families everywhere. You can kind of see that as a general theme here. Faith development of young people, the biggest influence is really the parents, right? Some would say it's the church, or some would say it's a school, but it really is the parents. The church needs to support the parents and needs to support the kids. And by supporting the kids, in turn, they are supporting the parents, right? So how are we prioritizing young people at LaGrave, right? Again, it goes back to every committee's work. We are still offering Sunday school, which many of our kids are at right now, and many of our kids are not at right now, right? So partnering with our parents and saying, hey, church is a priority, your faith is a priority, is something that we have to do. The book says, in strategizing this plan for your church, good intentions are not enough. Who you say you are is far less important to young people than who you really are, which will often require a culture shift within your congregation. You cannot fool young people into believing you have made them a priority. It has to be authentic, as Matt alluded to, and Steve, you did earlier. So actions speak far louder than words. And that is kind of this implementation. How are we going to, and we'll get to that kind of when we talk in the next few slides, but how are we going to authentically make this happen at LaGrave, right?
The next section is be the best neighbor, and that's a little scary, right, for our church. I think it is for me. How do we go and do that when we're in the heart of the city? But the love of God and the love of the neighbor. You love thy neighbor as thyself, and so really that's probably one of the easiest tasks that we can follow here is show. And we just talked earlier about kids wanting to live out their faith or serving out their faith, and we've got an amazing opportunity here for kids, and not just kids. I sometimes cringe at the title of this book called Growing Young, Because it's really just, it's not about the kids. It's maybe focused a little bit there, but we're trying to grow the whole church. We're trying to build connections to the young, but even to maybe to the older group, right? Maybe they're lonely, and so by kind of tying these two together, I think maybe even in Steve's example, everybody in that situation is benefiting. It's not just, oh, the kids are feeling happier now, or more connected now. When we talk about being the best neighbors, there's some things that we want to avoid. We did talk a little bit about that. We're not only aiming for perfection. Well, the system has to be vetted, and we've got to have practice to make sure that you only walk on the left side going down with the cross, and then on the return, it's okay, right? It's okay. I don't think I even shared this story in our meeting. I remember being here for a wedding, and I was an usher in the wedding, and this was many years ago, and someone from this church, I did not go there, was like, you can't walk this side and then walk this side. We only walk this way and we return on this way. That was like 20 years ago, and I still remember. And I didn't even go here.
You were a young person then.
I was younger. So aiming for perfection is really not necessarily the goal. We don't want this flawless program. Obviously, we're up here, we're winging half of what we're doing, and that's okay. Some other things is copying and competing. If we're going to try to create a program that's like copying kids' culture today, no. I'm not going to show up in my white shoes like my kids wear, and that's just not something that's gonna fly. Because as Mark said, you've got to be authentic, or that'll be sniffed out really fast. And we don't want to be misleading. We're not trying to do this program to be like, all right, we pulled another 25 kids, we pulled the wool over their eyes. No, we genuinely want to get to know who they are. We care about them. And also, there's not just one program that's going to be the savior of this program. In the book, there was a really good example of this person had just moved to Washington, D.C. She was like in her 20s. Church was, it was in the back of her mind, but it was not a goal of finding when she moved there. And one day she went to the park and she heard some music coming from a festival. And she went up, and there was a booth there about something about foster care and trying to reduce that in D.C. And that was really something that was passionate. She's like, oh, I feel passionate, like I can do something, I live out my faith that way. Well, come to find out, it was sponsored by a local church. And she got involved in this program, and then she kind of went to a few more things at church, and fast forward a year later, she's a worship leader at the church now, all because of this one program. She would have never walked in the door to say, check out this church. But by this church having this program or other programs, they were living out their faith, and that allowed her to do that as well. So.
And Matt, I just want to piggyback off that. We have a lot of opportunity through our Social Concerns Committee for young people to get engaged in serving in our community and give them that opportunity to find that identity with our church. Bob told a story early on about doing an outreach at Calvin College, and the number one thing that these students at Calvin were looking for was not worship style, was not a dynamic speaker. It was the opportunity to serve in the community, to act out their faith. And we have a ton of resources, and we have a ton of opportunity. We have great people that are working in that way, and our committee is working to make those connections for young people to be able to get out and be active in the community.
All right, so what's next? How do we implement this relational model at LaGrave? First, we are doing a lot of good things. We are doing some wonderful things here at LaGrave. And that, as Matt said, the goal is not to completely change the culture here, but it's just to enhance what we're already doing. There are so many examples out there that we received from all the committees that we've met with, from the feedback and the interviews that ministry architects did, and that is all information that we are poring over, and really what we've been looking at over the past year. Now it's time for us to get out and educate the congregation right? Through LaGrave News, through things like this. Bob is starting a Sticky Faith Growing Youth session at the end of February, right, Bob? A 4 week, 4 weeks of that, which is all important. So this education piece is big, but also recruiting, right? We are going to look over the organizational structure. We have it all laid out. We've done, that work has already been done. And we need to make sure that all of our leaders, not just, when I say leaders, I want you to think of not just like our ministers, but committee leaders, right? Are they trained? Do they have the tools that they need? And this goes all the way down to Boy Scout leaders or GEMS leaders, right? Do they have what they need? Do they have an understanding of what growing young is, right? So training is a big part of that. And when you're dealing with volunteers, and as Bob and our church leaders deal with a lot, that can be a very difficult task. We've all had volunteers that are hard to work with, right? And some you're like, well, how do you fire a volunteer? You can't do that. So we have to have the training in place. And I lost my track there. Accountability. We're a church, so there's different mechanisms already in place, right? We have a council. We've got a long-range planning committee. We've got youth education. Where does growing young fit in that? And arguably, it fits in all of it, right? There's not just one way that we can say, well, growing young, is the church growing young? Well, how are we going to measure that? Council's going to measure that, and we're going to give feedback on it every year. No, it really goes down to the committee levels. So what we need to do as a committee over the next few months is make sure that the feedback that we collected from our committee meetings, right, make sure that they have that, right, and that they are just implementing little things at a time. This is a thing that's going to take time. You can't just change the culture of the church overnight, right? But as long as, we continually are creating new ways, new opportunities for our youth, the model itself will be implemented. Now, the book says, how do you implement it? They say the first thing that you need to do is have this book on your bookshelf. Obviously, they want to sell books. But what we will do is we'll continue to provide summaries of, we'll hammer home those 6 essential ideas of growing young, and we'll continue to share that with the congregation in different ways. One thing, the whole committee we have kids here, right? We have skin in this game. I have a personal story. I've been a member here for 41 years, since I was born. I'm 41. I'm not growing young. I'm not getting younger either. So I went to LaGrave my whole life. My parents went to LaGrave their whole lives. And then I moved away after graduating from Grand Rapids Christian, moved away to Dayton, Ohio, and went to a Catholic school. If you know my family, that was a big thing, because I did not go to Hope College. And obviously Calvin was out of the picture. So I was told I had to go to a Christian college, so I broke away and went to a Catholic school. The priests that I had as professors, they all knew where I was from. They knew West Michigan. And they specifically would challenge me in every single class on my faith. And they did that in a loving way. And then after that, after college, I moved back home. And I was welcomed back to LaGrave, still had those contacts that I had growing up, Boy Scout leaders, youth leaders, and it was like coming home. And that's kind of what we're looking at, right? We cannot lose our kids. And where we're going to lose our kids? We're going to lose them between that middle school and college time frame. We have to keep them connected to the church. So that's why I'm passionate about this, and that's why I think as a church, we need to be passionate about it. If you want to close.
Yeah. On our sheet, it doesn't probably say that with you. Oh yeah, it does, right there in the bottom. That means, so we're to the U part. And that's really what makes this work, is you guys thinking of this or reading the book or taking one of these 6 things and saying, no, you know what, I've got a spot here, I could be a keychain leader. You know, like I could ask a kid to help me with this or mentor them in that part of what I do at church. Or, you know, I'm going to take it on myself every time I'm at church. I'm going to find somebody that's 20 and under, and I'm going to say hi to them, right? So, Olivia, you're going to get hammered on the way out of here, and Carmen was here earlier. But, and that's a good start, but eventually it's got to go past that. If it's just, hi, how are you, and then there's no connection. But if you get to say hi to that person now, like Steve said, over and over and over, now a relationship has been built there. That's what all this is about. And so kids have a sense of home here. They feel like they not only belong here because mom and dad drag them here, but they also are invested because who they are and what they can offer our church has been either seen or identified or developed. And that's really what we're trying. That's what all of this is about. So we would encourage you to either get the book or we'll get you another copy of the book. But that's why we're presenting today. So that's all I have. Mark, Steve, questions? Somebody have a question? We weren't that good at explaining things. All right.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Stay tuned
here we
for
go.
more.
Have you checked with the young people to see how they would like to serve and how their needs are being met?
That is a great question. It's a little hard to leave a meeting at church about growing young and then go beat your kids over the head with it. So they're not real responsive to that, but that's kind of some of the coming things that we would like to do is to have, so hey, what are you guys looking for, right?
And I can help answer that. So the book is based off of extensive research that the authors did, interviewing young people, looking for what they're looking for, and we use their research to really give this presentation and to guide our committee's work.
Yeah, I should
very
know what it is, but
research-based.
I don't remember how many thousands of churches and thousands of kids across the U.S. they modeled.
The entire book,
It's
the entire
amazing.
book, the whole Growing Young models based off those interviews with young people. It gives us a tool to work from.
Yes.
How old is the book?
Good.
That's growing with.
I think there's a shelf life on those sort of studies.
That's a great question.
Is it from the 80s?
No.
2016, so pre-COVID. I'm sure there's changes that could be made
I have-
since COVID. Oh, 2019,
2019
is
now.
this most recent one, but that's a good point. Yep. I would say, in my experience with my kids, the principles of this, which is just making sure young people feel God's love in our church, is even more important. Genuine relationships are even more important. I think that's really the undercurrent of all of it. And I think even more so coming out of COVID, that's what young people are looking
Yeah,
for.
and as between all of us, I mean, we've got college to elementary kids between the three of us, and reading through that, you're like, oh yeah, I can see that. Yep. Oh yep. I see this point. You know, so as a current parent in today's world, I can see a lot of relevancy in what they were saying. Yep.
I'm Judy Dottie, and I'm the one that climbs across the Bible bearers. So getting real practical, I would love more names. I would like people to say, you know what, my kid would like to do.
Bingo.
Yeah.
All right. That'd be awesome.
Bob.
Anyway, yeah, I would like to, I'm not in that age group anymore. I don't have teenagers. I don't know who they are.
Yeah.
So,
Well, and that's kind of what we're here to be like, okay, we think this is a great idea, but how do you get in touch with this group over here and then connect the dots, right?
Yeah, and that's exactly what growing young is. You want a young person involved in something? Well, you don't have to go and talk to Bob Gersing. You don't have to go to the youth ed committee, because I know 6 young people. And my friend knows 6 of these people. And my other friend knows 7 of those people. And so let's ask them, instead of who should I ask, right? I mean, that's the ultimate goal of growing young.